Are we live now?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Health Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Shoaib Akhtar and I will be chairing the meeting. Regulations have temporarily removed the legal requirement for local authorities to hold public meetings in person, but the Council is still required to make meetings accessible to the public, and this live stream enables councils to still make effective and transparent decisions on the delivery of services for residents. If a connection to a member is lost during this meeting, I will stop the meeting to enable the connection to be restored. If the connection cannot be restored within a reasonable time, the meeting will proceed, but the member who was disconnected will not be able to vote on the matter under discussion as they would not have heard all the facts. Should any aspect of the external link fail, I may call a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes or so to determine whether the council can quickly be, whether the connection can quickly be re-established either by video technology or telephone in the alternative. If the connection is not restored within that time, the meeting will be adjourned and any further business will not proceed until another time and date. Firstly, can I ask the clerk to ask the members to confirm their attendance?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Alias? Councillor Ibrahim?
Present.
Councillor McLaren?
Present.
Councillor Akhtar?
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. We also have representatives from the Northern Care Alliance, Oldham CCG and ABL Health, along with council officers in attendance. If the committee is required to take a vote on a report for approval, or if we are making a substantive recommendation, each member will be individually asked to state whether they are for, against, or abstaining. When a report is for noting, I will only ask if any member does not agree. As with all committee meetings, should it be necessary to exclude the press and public once the exclusion has been moved and agreed upon, the press and public will no longer be able to view the meeting. Can I ask members who wish to speak to please indicate using the chat function? If we can now turn to the agenda, and for the benefit of those members of the public watching, the full agenda pack is available on the council's website. Item 1, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillors Byrne, Cosgrove, Hamlet and Tor, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, we don't have any, do we have any urgent business? There are no items of urgent business.
We have no urgent, sorry.
Item 3, do any members wish to make any declarations of interest? No. Item 4, have we received any public questions?
We have none, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, members have before them the minutes of our last meeting held on 8th of December. Are these agreed as an accurate record? Does any member not agree? No, thank you. The minutes are agreed. We can have a slight variation in the agenda items. With members' agreement, I would like to take agenda item 7 at this point, as our presenter has another commitment to attend this evening. Item 7 is an update on employment support and local recruitment from the Northern Care Alliance NHS group, and any suggestions to further this agenda are requested from the committee. Members will recall that this was one of the further items that we requested in October last year when considering the Royal Oldham Hospital transaction programme. To introduce the report, we have Donna McLaughlin, the Director of Social Value Creation of the Northern Care Alliance. Donna, would you like to present the report, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. So this was debated last week in the meeting that Councillor McLaren chaired, it hopefully gives you a flavour of what we're offering as one of your, if not the largest employer on your patch in terms of the Royal Oldham Hospital plus the community services that we provide. There's a number of initiatives described in the programme. Just by way of caution, obviously COVID has impacted on everything, and it has impacted on our ability of whom we can and can't have within the hospital buildings because of infection risks. So some of the programmes are more descriptive because we are having to work with partners to make sure that we mitigate and that we can start to bring things back on site. So unfortunately, the numbers will at the moment look quite low, but we have got some plans to bring those back. It would be good if I could give you a trajectory that kind of said over the coming months, these are the number of opportunities we'll have month by month. I'm unable to do that until we are clear about what happens pending this third spike, because I'm sure, as you can appreciate, to try and bring particularly young people into areas of the hospital at the moment is quite limited. I've particularly focused on young people because I understand that was your request, but we do also provide opportunities for people who may wish to reskill, etc. So just to highlight the stuff that I'm proud of, I think our joint working with Oldham College is really strong. So we have been named in a national report as being an exemplar for developing a relationship with Oldham College. What that means in practice is for the new T levels, which are the new vocational qualifications that are coming in, we have helped write the health science roles for that. So now young people who complete sorry, not just young people, because adults can do this as well. Learners, I should use a more inclusive term, learners who complete that course now will have the skills to apply for one of our Band 2 jobs within Oldham Lab, and then there's a career structure to work the way up. We're probably the first in the country to do that, so I'm really proud of that. I'm also really proud with the funding we've got from the GMCA. So we've got 2 programmes that are starting despite COVID. One is to recognise that getting an apprenticeship, there are barriers to getting an apprenticeship, so we are doing some pre-apprenticeship work. So we're doing that with young people across the borough of Oldham, and that's working with Positive Steps and yourselves as the council. And the second area is we're doing a piece of work with Coldhurst community, and that is to recognise that the hospital sits in Coldhurst ward. So there's something about actually we are part of that community. So how do we come across, particularly to our BAME communities as an employer? And obviously the COVID pandemic has put a new perspective on that, given we know the impact that COVID has had within that population. So those are two things I just highlight that I'm particularly proud of, and that's alongside some of the stuff that we've been doing for years, like the supported internship for people with learning disabilities from Bridging the Gap, which is the programme we do with the special schools within Oldham, and also the Princess Trust that has been there for a number of years, as has our pre-employment programme looking at health support workers. I know this world inside out, and as hopefully your colleague from the meeting last week, I can talk about this for hours because I'm dead passionate about it. So it's probably easier just to open it up for questions, if that's okay.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute then. Does any member would like to ask a question? I've got a few questions myself. Shall I go first then?
You go first, Rob. Yeah, go on.
Donna, you've mentioned, this level 2 course with Oldham College, and learners will be able to apply for those jobs. Will these learners be guaranteed an interview if they do go for any of those posts, or do they?
So we guarantee a interview for anybody who's done a pre-employment course. Mm-hmm. So they are people who, and we're defining a pre-employment as anything that is 2 weeks or more. So we can't guarantee the T levels because they're the students who are at the college and who come to us for a placement. We can't. There's too many numbers. What we're trying to say is, of our pre-employment, we want 85% of people who do a pre-employment opportunity with us to move into into employment within the Northern Care Alliance, because obviously we have responsibilities greater than Oldham. And the reason why we're saying 85% is because we want to support some learners into degrees and other qualifications. So it's not that we're saying 85% because we expect 15% to fail. We expect 15% to be supported into other forms of learning.
So how would you monitor that then? And then
don't worry, I have scorecards for everything. So
Okay.
we have an internal process where we have negotiated through our trade unions that we are saying that the rigor we put into joining a pre-employment programme, where we look for value base, attitude, etc., as opposed to experience and some skills, because we're saying actually we can teach people skills, what we can't give them is values and attitudes. That is the equivalent to a job interview. And actually, if you've turned up for, some of our pre-employment learners do 10 weeks, some do 6 weeks. Our learning disability supported internship, they do a year. If you're turning up every day for free, isn't that a better indication of your commitment than a 20-minute job interview? So therefore we're saying, and then we have a process by which we work with that individual to say, you've now experienced this is our offer, move you in.
Oh, brilliant. And
Now,
obviously
this is very new, so we're tracking that. But certainly Oldham, we're starting to have a good traction on that.
And you've mentioned the fact that you've got a scorecard, so it'll be interesting in terms of what other information you'll be collecting through that scorecard, and if you could share that with us, then we can decide as a committee which information would be useful for us to monitor on.
So the scorecard we've got looks at the moment, it looks at numbers onto the pre-employment. So we've got a trajectory to get us to 1,000 across the NTA over the next 5 years. So there's a trajectory on that. We've got a trajectory on the NHS career ambassadors. So we want 1,000 of our staff to be ambassadors that can go into the community and talk about the 350 jobs that are within the NHS. So again, I've got a scorecard that tracks that across all the departments. And then from them, we're then looking at what work experience do we offer, what pre-employment do we offer, and we can then share that with partners.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Me and Colin, well, whoever chairs the committees will decide which one you need to go to, because no point having you attending both committees, to be honest with you. So it's better we'll decide between ourselves which one's better.
No pressure, Chair, but at the last meeting I got 2 offers to go into schools, and another councillor has contacted me. So the last week I got three offers of help and support. So no pressure.
No,
I've got a few suggestions later on. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, hello again, Donna. Following our discussion last week, so in a sense, I'm going to try and pick up some of the points that we were talking about last week. I mean, I think, as was probably apparent, the scheme has got huge potential, and I think what we were looking for was ways in which we might be able to extend the idea, that maybe it's something that could be developed with other partners. Not just necessarily in the public sector, but we have 1 or 2 large private sector organisations within Oldham that might be willing to try and take something of this kind of approach on board. And I wonder whether perhaps that might be worth exploring, or whether it has been explored perhaps already.
So I think my approach to that would be we, the NHS, are quite new to this party. We know that if you look at things like the cooperative movement, the way that the old big industry used to work, they're much more embedded in the community.
Right. So
of anybody. So yeah.
Right. So in principle, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that we look for ways in which we could approach others with a view to perhaps arranging a discussion as to how the model works, to see whether they might be able to take this, adopt this approach.
Yeah, delighted. Just introduce me to anybody and I'll talk to them.
Yeah. The likes of Diodes, etc. I'm trying to think of their American name, but anyway, they're one of our big employers in Oldham. We do have 1 or 2 others that might be worth considering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly.
The other thing that came out of last week's discussion was among, as you say, offers to go into schools, etc. Whether we could extend that out and open that offer, if not you personally, but some of your colleagues might be able to go into other schools, or some will have personal connections with other schools through their children, through pupils, etc. Whether there's anything in that area that we might be able to explore, but also whether we might look at the youth service and the job centres and so forth to see what they might be able to take on board.
Yeah, so we've started to have good conversations with the Job Centre Plus. So I now meet with them regularly, where we can kind of make sure that they're up to speed. And obviously the Kickstart, which is another scheme, we're doing that joint with them. I think also we're really keen that we'll go to wherever we need to work with the community to understand what jobs the NHS have. So one of your colleagues from the last meeting's given us an introduction into one of the mosques. I think that'd be fantastic in terms of to be able to talk to parents as well, because we know parents really influence what young people do, but also not just to talk about young people. We know at different points in people's lives they make different career or job choices. So it may be that, you know, getting into women after they've had the children, you know, they've got a wealth of experience that is what we're looking for in terms of caring. So how can we support those in? So really, it won't just be me. I'm trying to develop this army of 1,000 people behind me, so that we'll try and make sure that whatever the audience, we're pitching a member of our staff who is closest to that audience, because we know that, you know, I'm sure I shared some of those stories last week, that if you identify with the person who's standing in front of you, that has a greater sway.
So when you say 1,000 behind you, does that, I mean, is there a training program?
Yes.
Presumably for those, so anybody within the health service can engage in this training program?
Yes.
Right. So the principle could be extended to the council, for argument's sake?
Yeah, so I went a couple of weeks ago. So within Oldham, as you know, we've got really integrated teams. So you've got a district nurse who works with a social worker. So the district nurse had joined up, and then her friend, the social worker, said, I'd quite like to do that. So we actually have got some social care staff who are now, so not only are we going into schools to talk about nursing, that they went in and did a joint presentation. Well, actually, this is what a nurse does, and this is what a social worker does, and this is what we do together. Right. So yeah.
So really what you're saying, Donna, is how can we best identify the best way of working forward, if you like, jointly, in some kind of partnership form. Yeah. So perhaps it might not be possible to discuss that now, but perhaps we could arrange another meeting outside of the committee structures that were in order to discuss how we can develop this strategy.
Yeah, that'd be better. Yeah. Councillor Ibrahim.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. This is great, and it's quite positive, and it does open up a gateway for many other opportunities. Like Colin mentioned, possibly a great idea to link with other healthcare providers outside of the hospital, probably like GP surgeries and also pharmacies. But I work at a pharmacy, and we're always happy to take on people who are willing to look for opportunities to learn just basic experience in any sort of healthcare profession, because there's many people out there in the community that just want to get out of their home environment just to pick up some experience, and we're happy to take them on. Obviously, this pandemic at the moment is very difficult, but out of the pandemic we do take on people just for experience purposes, just to give them that bit of experience so that they can use it anywhere in other jobs, just to say that they've had some training, some experience. So maybe linking into other healthcare providers will be sort of like something to think about as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So Mark has my email address, so if we make sure that it's circulated. But our pharmacies is a really good suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Broom. That's a good suggestion. Any further questions from anyone before I come in again? I've put in the chat function that I've got linking to Oasis Academy through work. We do quite a lot of work with them around employment and training. So I'll have a chat with them and see if we can ask you to come in and promote some of the opportunities, and then at the same time talk about different careers that are actually available within the NHS. I've got a further ask of you, Donna. I've noticed in your job description that you've got social value in there. So around that, in terms of, obviously, this is excellent around employment opportunities, but there are other functions within the NHS around procurement, commissioning.
Yeah.
How do small businesses within Oldham actually have access, and how can you open up those opportunities to some of these, to some of the small businesses within the area, and what is the process, and how can we, again, collectively work with you to ensure that our small businesses are accessing the opportunities? And then
So that's
the other one.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'll let you answer that, and then I'll come in for the other one.
So that's my next big area. So I'm starting, actually, it's a good question, because next week I am getting all of the policy leads, because obviously the NCA is bigger than just Oldham. It's Bury, Rochdale, Salford. Yeah. So I'm getting so each council's kind of got a policy officer who's leading on their inclusive economy, whatever, different, but in terms of skills and growth type. So we literally, and I've just finished it, have done analysis of everything we spend that doesn't go out the payroll, and we're going to present it to all of you to say, this is what we spend, and this is the stuff that we spend within Oldham, within Rochdale, within Bury. This is what we spend within GM, and this is what we spend outside of those. So to kind of say, so if we spend this bulk of stuff outside of GM, how can we work with you as councils to develop the skills and the economic strategy to then turn that into a productive, to create the supply chain that means we don't have to go outside of our locality, because we've also got a commitment that we want to change by 10% our local spend. And the key way of doing that is by breaking down our contracts so that they are able for small businesses to either come together as a partnership to bid against, or we break it down. We have got tensions within the NHS, and it's not as easy as employment, because we've got national rules over national procurement, and the NHS works. There's a policy tension that says buy cheap together or buy locally, and there is a tension. So what we want to do is work with the economic development guys within councils, because it's a bit of the world that we don't understand, to say, help us with this. We have got some early wins, so a real big way through this is through capital programmes. So we've just done the James Potter building at Salford. It's been awarded to a Salford architect, a Salford project build, and something like, don't quote me on this, but I'll get you the exact figures, 75% of the spend is going to be within Salford and GM. I've taken that model, and I've got a meeting next week around the Oldham build to say, right, that's a real, if you start to build something, it's a visible sign to the population. How do you make sure that it is Oldham people who are in that build, working on that build, and also how we also using that, again, working with the college for apprenticeships around building trades, etc. So it is, to me, it's we've kind of got the planks of social value is people in terms of employment, procurement in terms of locking as much of our money to the NCA has a non-pay spend of 1.2 billion. A 10% swing on that, that's massive. So how do we make sure that we secure that? We've also got another pillar around sustainability and climate change and environment, as well as how do we use our scale to influence particularly some of the tensions that we have within the NHS, which does tend to look up rather than necessarily out.
No, brilliant.
So,
there is a group of there's a partnership within Oldham who are looking at getting some external funding in through for social enterprises, and this group is looking at bidding for about £8 million, and that's going to be across 4 local authority areas. It's Oldham, Stockport, Bolton and Wigan, I think it is. And again, if you're interested, I can ask
that would be
lead
brilliant
on that partnership to actually invite. What I'm thinking of, obviously, in terms, there will be some gaps within the service provision. If we can set up social enterprises within Greater Manchester, definitely, within Oldham, but then wider, who can access, or where you think there's a gap, we could look at setting up a social enterprise to fill that gap and open up those opportunities for
I mean, PPE is a classic. You know,
Yeah.
Oldham was, you know, it was built on, you know, textile,
So
and we're buying PPE from outside of Oldham. Well,
so
there
let's
must be a way.
let's promote. Well,
Yeah.
let's promote that from through the. Well, I'll have a chat with the council's comms department. That could be one of the recommendations from the committee, is to work with our communications department to ask providers out there to who, in terms of textile industries, anybody prepared to make PPE equipment.
Oh, we have got some good experience of this. So before this role, I was chief officer up at the hospital, and the tender for theatres, so it's a 1.2 million tender over, I think it was over 3 or maybe 5 years. We broke that down, and it was a local association of trades who won that. It's local engineers who won it. It didn't go to one of the big guys, but that just means we have to have a way of, like most things in the NHS, we use our own language and we do it slightly differently, which if you're not in the, you know, so we needed to make sure that we broke that down. And that was working through your economic people and through the supply guys who work in the council. So we have done this. We just need to keep at it. Definitely,
yeah. The other one was obviously in terms of social values. You said this is new to you, but you know, in terms of when you're commissioning and procuring contracts, if you can have a menu of sort of around social value in terms of how some of those contractors can actually contribute. It doesn't need to be monetary sort of value. It could be that they could sort of create different opportunities or donate items to community groups, etc. So and again, the council have a menu, and where I work, we creating a menu as well in terms of how some of our contractors can actually contribute towards that, and I'll be willing to share that with you.
That'd be great, Councillor. Thank you.
Is there any more sort of questions or observations from any members? No? Right, thank you for your time, Donna, for coming along to our committee, and if you could come back and obviously around the procurement and commissioning, share what work you've done, say in another, I don't know, 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, can I just come back to you on the timescale? It's just this little thing called COVID keeps getting in the way.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So I said that to Councillor McCallan. I've got a delighted, and even I've just come and give you a brief overview. What I'm not able to do is say by this month we'll do this, and by this month we'll do this, because you know.
And like I said to you before, we'll work between us and we'll decide which committee you come to as well. There's no point coming to both of them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, but thank you for your time and thank you for those connections.
Sorry, Chair, do we want to arrange a meeting before the 6 months in order to sort of work on some of the detail as to how we take this forward? Is that perhaps one of the recommendations that, because I think we might need to engage with cabinet members, and once we have a strategy, as it were, that we work on the detail, that something we can take forward and share with others, with other potential partners besides the council.
Yeah, fine.
So I've been into there's an inclusive economy group that Rebecca Sutcliffe chairs. So I've done a similar update through offices there. So maybe if I send, my mind's gone blank because I work across the 4 localities, and the name of the person who I worked with on that, John, no, that he's at Salford. I'll send
John
those
Blow?
to Mark. Pardon?
John Blow?
It wasn't John, but I have done some stuff with John. Let me send Mark a list of the people within the council who I've been talking to, and then we can try and, because I think you're right, it kind of feels like I've kind of done a bit of this is what we could do around a few places, and let's all sit.
Let's join it all. Let's join it all.
I think that's what we need to do, Chair, definitely. Yeah.
There's no point sort of asking you to come to different council sort of committees and sort of sharing the same information. So internally we need to do some joined up working.
Yeah, correct.
We'll do that. But I think in terms of, you know, the recommendation that I made before around having a conversation with our communications department around putting an ask out there for PPE equipment, sort of that could be sort of manufactured within Oldham. Yeah. So we'll go ahead with that, and obviously we'll get someone from comms to get in touch with you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye now.
Thanks, Anna. Right. If we can go back to sorry, before we go to item 6, Mark, could you make a note of that recommendation, please?
I have done, Chair, and the items for the work programme, which will be included, and we can sort out timing and everything as we go forward. Yeah.
Thank you for that. If we can now go back to item 6, tackling digital exclusion in Oldham, which is an issue that we have impressed concern about across several recent sort of meetings. This item gives us an opportunity to share gaps we are aware of as members in tackling the digital divide in Oldham. To present the report this evening, we have Fran Lockman, the Council's Customer and Digital Lead, and we also have Dominic Whelan from Unity Partnership with us. So Frank and Dominic,
it's just Fran this evening.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, and thank you very much, and good evening, members. So this comes from an ask from the Health Scrutiny Committee back in November to have further detail specifically around digital inclusion and how people can access health services throughout the pandemic. I've kind of taken that a step further and tried to frame that within the strategic context around digital inclusion, both nationally and regionally, to share further detail with committee members around the context of the work going on in Oldham in this sense. This paper has also been through the portfolio holders for digital, which is the leader and Councillor Jabbar in terms of deputy leader, and they've been fully involved in the shaping of it as well. So just in terms of running through the key information, and then obviously happy to take any questions, Chair, from the committee. The report provides a summary of activity going on across at this moment in time across Team Oldham, and that includes examples across the council and much wider and further afield in terms of Oldham, because it really is about us coming together with communities to tackle digital inclusion and not about the council working on its own in isolation. So the examples throughout the paper seek to provide a bit of a range. It's not everything, but a range of the different activity going on. So it also shares a summary of the future work and initiatives that we need to do and deliver in this space at pace. So there's some suggestions around what we do going forward, and that includes this paper or a similar version being presented to the Oldham Leadership Board, and digital inclusion being a regular agenda item at that quarterly meeting, to make sure that we have that visibility across the system, and that each of the organisations represented on the Oldham Leadership Board are able to join up and really lead this agenda within their respective organisations to make sure it is at the forefront of everybody's minds. Additionally, myself as the custodian of the digital strategy and roadmap, I will continue the work that I've done in recent months to kind of frame this and pull this together to coordinate the digital inclusion offer across our services, to make sure that we have strategic leadership in this space and to give it some energy and momentum to make sure that we join up rather than thinking of service specific approaches. Next, it will also be a key strand of the Team Oldham COVID recovery strategy, because we recognise that as we move through the different stages of recovery for COVID, that digital inclusion is a really key item in terms of how communities get back on their feet and how we support people economically. Related to that as well, the emerging work and skills strategy will have some really important work in there around digital skill development. And lastly, we're going to be developing a really robust evidence base around digital inclusion, because going forward we need to make sure that any activity that we deliver or commission in this space really makes a difference with the people who need the support in this space the most, and we need to make sure we have really robust evidence and insight behind that. So in terms of the recommendations that the committee are asked to reflect on, is to note the GM digital inclusion strategy, which is included in Appendix B, and not only the opportunity we have to work better as a system in Oldham, but the opportunity to work across GM in this space to reduce the digital divide. The next one is to note the summary of initiatives in place across Oldham that are summarised in the paper, and also those in development. And then this is really important to me, to hear back from members whether they consider that there are any gaps in tackling the digital divide in Oldham that we need to consider that haven't already been included in the paper. And lastly, we're keen for committee to endorse that digital inclusion is included as a specific item within the equalities section on all council decision-making reports to make sure it's sufficiently considered in all decisions taken by the council. So that's just a brief overview. I'll spend a few minutes going through section 1 and we'll then follow through the rest of the paper. So just in terms of the background and context around digital inclusion, there is a standard definition around this, and it is about when somebody doesn't have the access or the skills, confidence or motivation to use technology in their day-to-day lives. And in terms of why that matters, 21% of the UK population have been estimated to not have the digital skills that are in the government's essential digital skills framework. And it's a social issue. It's not about technology. It's about the impact that it can have on somebody's life in terms of their health outcomes, their employment opportunities, the way that they connect with their friends and family. And more importantly, it affects those who are already at some other disadvantages, and therefore it's really important that it's something that's taken seriously and the scale of it is understood. There's further detail in Appendix A that's been included with this paper around the research that the Good Things Foundation have conducted nationally in this space. And I think we're all aware, and obviously the request came in from this committee for this report, around the impact of COVID in this space. It's already there's already clear evidence about the impact this has had, particularly on children and families around learning. For families where there's people in the family looking for employment opportunities, and it's really important that we connect together a system to tackle this. From a GM perspective, it's been estimated that there is as many as 1.2 million people in GM who are digitally excluded, and that's why GM have come together to shape the digital inclusion strategy. And we have a really unique opportunity in Oldham through the work of our leader and the fact that his portfolio includes digital and skills to make sure that we work across GM to really break down these barriers. So section 2, and I'm sure you'll be glad to know I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, assuming that you've all read the paper.
Yeah.
What I've done is I've just given some examples of the really varying activity going on across services, to kind of bring to life the breadth of how services have responded to COVID, and partners, including DWP, to acknowledge that this is a challenge for some of the people who use support and services, and how do we reshape the way that support and services are accessed. And then in terms of section 3, moving forward together, the digital strategy that's in its final stages of being shaped before it goes through the governance and decision-making process will act as the framework to hang this activity within the digital communities theme. As I've mentioned, it's going to be a key part of the COVID recovery strategy, the work and skills strategy, and it's this paper, when it's been round officers, has really kind of got people's attention going in this space and the need for us to come together much more joined up as a system. In terms of other things that are happening in the future, really delighted to say, because I know, Chair, you really felt quite strongly this is something that we need to look at, that we are going to be launching the tablet lending and gifting scheme for adults who are most in need of that. And there'll be a referral pathway process for that across the system to make sure that adults who really need that support, whether it be a lend or a gift, can have access to that. And we're not looking at it service specifically. So that's being commissioned at the moment. The funding behind that isn't huge, but it is going to be able to make a real start on that, and hopefully we can continue to attract funding to that part. We're also, children's services are looking at rolling out Wi-Fi packages for independent care leavers. We've also thought really carefully about digital inclusion from the census, and we're working together with the ONS to see if we can obtain more paper copies based on the data and analysis that we've done locally around digital inclusion, to encourage uptake of that. And then I'm also shaping, as I mentioned, a commission through the council's IT and strategy and performance function, the evidence base that will really drive our decision making around digital inclusion going forward, which will pull together lots of our data sets. So that's a summary, Chair. There are 2 questions for Health Scrutiny to consider as well. I'm obviously happy to take any questions or any feedback on the paper.
Cheers, thank you for that, Fran. Do any members have any questions or observations? Anyone wants to go first before I do? No? Right, okay. I've got a few observations. The first one's around section 2 itself, in particular around education. I mean, I've got some real concerns about the lack of IT hardware equipment for our young people across the borough, to be honest with you. And obviously, as a result of that, they are missing out on their education. And in Oldham, they're affected more than, say, in most other local authority areas, because in Oldham, we had the local restrictions prior to this 3rd lockdown. And if these young people haven't got access to digital devices in households, then they're missing out on education. And in some instances, some families might have one device shared between 5 of them, or 3 or 4 different people. And the government, I know the government has let us down, but as a local authority and as Greater Manchester Combined Authority, what are we actually doing about it, and how are we actually raising this with the government as well? And I think that's something that we need to do. There's something that we need to do about it. And my sort of personal recommendation that I'll put to the committee is that we ask the leader to write to the Prime Minister and say this is not acceptable, and we need digital devices sent to Oldham as soon as possible, and maybe the Mayor of Manchester needs to take that task on as well.
Would it be helpful to share a brief update on that one, because I understand how important this issue is to lots of people and officers and members. So we recognise the challenge, and we're hearing that locally on the ground as well. In terms of, we're hearing that the government have got more devices, we yet to see them. And in terms of GM, the Mayor, about a week and a half ago, launched the GM Tech Fund, phase 2, which is seeking for businesses across GM to donate devices to that. And there was a fund, like a kind of focus day of that Friday just gone, that was fairly successful. What we have been really quick to do in Oldham is to pull together and ask a survey for every education setting to say, can you tell us specifically how many children it's a barrier to learning, in the sense that every child, as you said, in the home should have a device, and where are their households where the data is the barrier. So we're looking at it from a device and from a data perspective. So we're in the process of pulling that together to say to GM, this is specifically the areas and the schools that we need to work with where there is the most need. So we've got a good data return on that. We're just waiting for some further detail before we send that back. So we're very much linked into GM to make sure we've got an evidence base that we can say across GM we have need in Oldham and we need to be prioritised potentially for devices. But as we said, we're waiting to hear about when we're actually going to get government devices on the ground.
I mean, that's the point, you see. I mean, obviously we can collect the data and etc., but by doing this, weeks and months are being sort of passed by, and these kids.
It's an issue of people today.
Yeah, these kids need those devices today, not tomorrow or a week later or a month later.
Which is why the GM approach is really helpful, because the devices are coming in now.
Yeah, but how do we as members? Obviously, there's our constituents contacting us saying our school hasn't provided any IT equipment to our child, and how do we get one? And some of us are getting those requests on a daily basis. How do we as members sort of who do we put those requests to at the local authority? And what is the process? Is there a process? And if not, can we develop one? Go on, Fran, if you want to come back, or shall I get Councillor McLaren to?
No, happy for Councillor McLaren to come in, and then I'll come back to you.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to, anyway, long time no speak, Fran, but...
Hello, nice to see you, Councillor McLaren, I'm
but I'm
still
going to
here.
continue on the same theme. You won't be surprised, but,
Sure.
Clearly, digital exclusion is a major problem across the borough, not just in schools, but for every generation, etc., every community, basically. So I think part of the problem is how do we ensure that people are able to access devices, as it were, laptops in its simplest form, if you like, in order to be able to look for jobs or support children's education. The parents are equally required to make a contribution, especially those who are, if you like, working from home and supporting education from home, etc. But I wonder whether there's any scope for exploring some kind of library system, because clearly we're never going to get enough devices to meet the demand to give everyone, every household, as it were, a personal device. So the question is, therefore, whether we can work with schools and libraries, etc., to develop a provision that can be accessed and, on a like library books, if you like, on the same principle, but obviously ensuring that they remain secure and so on, so that they don't disappear. But I think we've got to try and find some way of developing that kind of approach whilst we work towards the possibility of eventually acquiring enough to enable schools to be able to address this problem, public services to be able to address this problem, as and when the need arises. I think that would have to be the kind of aspiration, if you like, that we need to work towards. I would think the chances of central government helping us out to that extent are probably nil. So therefore, we might need to engage with other partners. We might need to look at the grant system, either through the voluntary sector or through schools, friends of schools, for example, this kind of approach. But I think the council on its own is not going to be able to solve this problem. I think we're going to have to find some kind of some kind of partnership approach to at least begin to address it, to try and ameliorate the worst effects of it at this point in time, and whilst we work towards a better solution, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren, that's really helpful to understand. Can I share a little bit more detail around the library scheme that's going to be developed? Yeah. So we used some successful funding for GM, which was 40,000, and 10,000 from the library budget. And today, I'm delighted to share that we've found an additional 15,000 from the customer services budget. So we're now talking about £65,000 that we can use towards that blended tablet lending and gifting scheme. But it will be primarily aimed at adults rather than children, because of the work, which I completely agree, doesn't address the barriers from an education perspective, but from an adult perspective, will particularly pick up the challenges around employment and access. And the challenge that I've set our IT colleagues is to say we need as many devices as we possibly can get for that funding, but they need to be robust, easy to use devices. Because we need to have the maximum reach that we can in this space. We need to give as many people the access as possible. And then from an access perspective, a number of Oldham libraries remain open for access to public PCs, for the very reason that we know it's such an important lifeline, whether that's from a social perspective or from an employment perspective, for residents to continue to have access to that essential service. And obviously some councils don't have that provision open at the moment. I think something I'd like to propose that we take away is that offer needs to be better communicated and shared, because I think there's still patchy awareness that those libraries are open for that specific service. But yeah, that's just a little more detail on that.
Are those libraries across the borough open, or is it only certain libraries that are open?
It's only certain libraries. I think it's off the top of my head, I wouldn't want to say which ones they were, but there's around 4 of them that are open, and it's
Right, okay.
you can book an hour at a time, and
Mhm.
it's public access PC, so you can use it for whatever.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Councillor Alias?
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, can I apologise for joining the meeting a little late because I was at work, just finished in time, but just managed to join in. Secondly, I think I just wanted to also recommend that we have some sort of a library, but I've had a couple of my constituents over the last couple of weeks asking me to help them out with a device that their children can actually use, because there's, most of the households do have access to some sort of digital devices, but because all of their children are now at home and they're studying or they're joining the classes at the same time, so they don't have enough devices for all the children to join in, and for those who don't have these devices, obviously their children are missing out on the education. I was also going to recommend that we have some sort of a library system where some of these people might just need a temporary solution, a temporary borrowing of an IT equipment. If we can sort that out, that'll be quite useful. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're hoping that the scheme that we're in the process of setting up will help a number of people where that access is a barrier to that. Going back to the point specifically, I want to make sure I give you a rounded answer on the education element. So what I'd like to propose is that I come back to you with the information about how the national scheme and how schools feed into that, the regional scheme, and then any gaps that we may have locally, because the devices that are allocated to schools, the government have committed to meet that gap, and we're mopping that up regionally. But as we know, and as you've all said, that takes time, and that's not good enough for those families who are experiencing those issues today. So I'm hoping that if we can publicise better the access to the library public PC access, that that should help a little. But obviously, please let me know, and I'm happy to come back and have a specific meeting on any concerns you have from an education perspective around what members might want to do next in terms of feeding that up through the leader or through the mayor, by sharing with you a bit more information around what that looks like from a national and regional perspective.
Right, okay, brilliant. Just on the library sort of lending side of things, obviously we've got certain libraries which are closed at the moment, and some of those libraries will have IT equipment there that's probably not being used for almost a year now. And again, we need to look at that and say, hold on, how can that particular equipment be used by lending it out to people's households? And because at the moment it's just lying there and not being utilized, and we've got residents out there who could do with that kind of equipment. And secondly is around, obviously, as a local authority, we'll be replacing some of our PCs, laptops, etc. And what do we do with them? Who do we give them to? And can we not recycle them back into the community and give them to those that need it the most?
So in terms of the recycling scheme, the GM Tech Fund is about businesses donating devices, but also anybody giving devices that they finished using, and GM will coordinate the recycling, refurbishing and reissuing of those to schools. So that is underway as well. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Because what one would do is, something similar to what with the positive cycle scheme that we've got. If we can get positive steps to do in line with that, do a sort of calling it positive cycles, calling it positive digital, or I don't know, come up with a name.
We'll think of something.
Whatever. But they could run it in line with each other, can't they? From the same premises in a way, because they've got a room upstairs.
Yeah, what we've heard from GM is if basically Oldham within Oldham, if there's devices donated, they will go back out to Oldham,
Right.
which is great. So I think I've already spoken to comms colleagues around publicising the GM Tech Fund, and you may have already seen that that's been promoted on Facebook, on Twitter. I've asked them as well to see if the leader could do a short soundbite on that to aid the promotion of it as well. So that's underway. I've put in the group chat, just 'cause I didn't want to tell you the wrong libraries off the top of my head, the ones that are open, and those opening hours as well. And that web page is on the COVID support page on the council website. But I think I will ask comms colleagues to go away and better publicise that as well, alongside the GM Tech Fund. So I'll take that away.
Thanks for that, Colin. Did you have any? Sorry,
yes, one of the points I was about to make just appeared in the chat, actually, that there might be many companies that would be willing to share in that kind of scheme, and perhaps also that's something we might be able to talk to Donna McLaughlin about. Also, I would have thought worth pursuing. But I also wanted to just make a point about your paragraph 4.2 in your report, which is endorsing that digital inclusion be included as a specific item. I wondered whether we could add something else to that, as well as digital inclusion, whether we could make a reference to poverty. That you are asked that you include the two things in a reference to whether the report that you're writing or presenting also addresses poverty issues as well as digital inclusion issues. They are obviously related.
Well, I personally think broadband, digital inclusion should be broadband itself now should be an essential item similar to water, electricity and gas.
Yeah,
in the current climate.
It's so critical to the way that we live our lives now.
Exactly.
Sure.
And it should be considered as part of that. And maybe from a Greater Manchester angle is how do we bulk buy broadband? Similar to what we've done for utilities for gas and electric. Maybe we need to look at a scheme similar to that for broadband as well. And at the same time, how can we provide free Wi-Fi as a local authority and combined authorities across Greater Manchester? We pay for broadband for our officers to work on, and we have offices in communities as well. And how could we bounce that signal off into the community from those buildings? We need to look at these different options.
Well, maybe that's what needs to be in the letter to that Sean writes, Chair. That might be the theme that we are sure.
No, but that's something that we need to look at locally, to be honest with you, rather than at the government level. Because we've got
write a letter to the mayor.
If we look at, say, ourselves, our strategic partners, NHS, housing associations, schools, buildings, they're all in the heart of the community.
Sure.
And in the evening, none of these the Wi-Fi is not being used. So why can't that signal be opened up to the local community? Say it doesn't have to be for an hour or two hours. I'm sure there'll be some sort of security issues or whatever. It can be managed if the will is there to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And we can pilot it in certain neighbourhoods and see how it goes.
I'd love to be able to answer the question, but unfortunately I am unable to from a technical perspective.
I didn't expect you to answer that, because obviously it's technical. But it's something that you need to take back.
Yeah.
And as a leadership, they need to consider that.
I think the suggestion around looking at that from a GM perspective would be really helpful in terms of just the interoperability across GM and the economies of scale in terms of.
I'll have to disagree with you on that. Yeah, it needs to be looked at GM level, but GM if we wait for GM to make a decision, we'll be waiting forever. Because you're talking about 10 local authorities, whereas if we can lead on it, let's go for it.
Well, can it not be whether we look at ask Sean to look at his brief?
Sorry,
because that's his brief, isn't it? Digital inclusion is his brief.
Yeah, but it needs to be discussed at that level. But what I'm saying, sometimes it takes.
I think we need to write
experience.
Write to him to ask him to raise it.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think we can look at it concurrently. To make sure we maintain momentum locally. Yeah.
So we've made a number of different suggestions.
Oh, I've noted them all down.
Right. Okay. Well, we can share them with Mark then.
I'm sure Mark will come back. But what I'd like to do quite quickly, Chair, just because I've probably got about 75% of the information in my head, I just don't want to give you inaccurate information. As I will pull together that this is the summary of how schools request things nationally. This is what the government have said. This is how we do it locally. This is what GM have said. So we've got those informations to think about how you want to go forward with, potential local provision. So more than happy to come back.
I think it'll be useful for members in terms of if they get any requests from families,
yes.
who do we pass them on to as well?
Yeah,
so
course.
If you can develop a protocol there for us, that'd be useful.
Yeah, lovely. Between myself and Patsy Kane, who's CEO for Oldham Learning, we'll come back to you, if not by the end of this week, early next week, Chair.
Cheers, thank you for that. Are there any further observations or suggestions for Fran? No? Fran, thank you for your time this evening, and I hope you found it useful, and you will come back in the future.
That's right, I was going. Thank you very much, Chair, and have a good evening, everyone.
Cheers, thank you.
Bye.
Just a question about the recommendation, Chair. Whether we can add to the digital exclusion, whether we could add poverty as a pointer.
I think you noted that, yeah.
Well, are members happy to agree? Are members happy to recommend that alongside the digital inclusion clause?
Yeah, definitely. And then the other recommendation around asking the leader to write to the Prime Minister as well. What do members think of that? Obviously, that's political rather than discussing in front of Fran.
Well,
I think we need to do it.
Armchair, it may yet achieve some good.
Yeah, exactly. So could we ask?
I see no reason why not.
Yeah, could we ask the leader to do that, and at the same time, if the leader could ask the Mayor of Manchester to do it as well, on behalf of all 10.
Yeah.
All 10. Well, we can only recommend Oldham, can't we? We can't recommend all 10.
Yeah.
So okay, have you noted that, Mark?
Yes, Chair.
Is everyone in agreement of that then?
Agreed.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. We'll move on to item 8. We've got some colleagues who've been waiting for a long time with us. So the next item is the Health Improvement and Weight Management Service. And we are asked to review the collaborative commissioning exercise undertaken by the Council and the CCG for this service and the new Health Improvement Service offer. Katrina Stevens is with us. Is she with us, Katrina? Yeah, she is, I think. Yeah, Katrina is with us tonight, along with Andrea Entwistle and Angela Welsh and Mohammed Raz as well to introduce. So if you could all introduce the report and sort of present it to us, and then we'll open it out to sort of observations and questions after that. So who wants to go first? Is it yourself, Andrea, or?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Chair. That's okay. And thanks for the opportunity to be able to update the committee on the outcome of the recent collaborative commission for the Oldham's Health Improvement Weight Management Service. The committee's happy for us to do so. Angela and I, as the two commissioners, will provide a brief verbal overview of the context and rationale for the commission and the procurement exercise. And then we'll introduce colleagues from ABL Health who've joined us today to be able to introduce Your Health Oldham, which launched at the beginning of January. So, as I've mentioned, it was a collaborative commission between the Council and CCG as Oldham Cares, and this was the first truly integrated commission undertaken by the two organisations. We procured via an open competitive tendering process for a 5-year contract with an option to extend for up to 2 years. And the contract value is £970,000 a year, with £700,000 of that from the Council Public Health budget and £270,000 from the CCG. And that split is proportionate to the statutory responsibilities of the two organisations. In terms of context and rationale for the Commission, as I'm sure committee are aware, Oldham's adult population is less physically active, smokes more and carries more excess weight than the England average. And nearly a third of our children aged 2 to 15 are overweight or obese. Oldham's also got a significantly higher number of people with recorded diabetes and deaths from smoking related diseases, cardiovascular disease and cancer, and these are all higher than the England average, with smoking and dietary risk contributing to a third of all deaths in Oldham. Obviously, these major risk factors are preventable and modifiable. And therefore, we believe that more needed to be done to address these behavioural risk factors in order to improve our population health, to reduce that demand on health and social care services and to reduce health inequalities. Prior to this tender and since 2015, Oldham's Community Stop Smoking Service and Health Check Service was part of the early help offer, and this was commissioned by the local authority. And the Tier 3 weight management service was delivered separately and commissioned by the CCG. There are a number of areas of improvement within that offer. For example, the offer available through the early help service focused primarily on adult smoker cessation. They did have a limited reach. Our Tier 2 weight management support, which was the behavioural change support, was limited to vouchers from Slimming World or Weight Watchers, and the financial provision of that from the local authority ended in October 2019. We also didn't have any Tier 2 weight management support in the borough for children and young people. And the model that we did have in place around weight management didn't allow any of our residents to be able to increase or decrease the level of support that they needed depending on their need, or to be able to move between the local authority provider and the NHS, the CCG provider, meaning that people had to complete multiple referrals and assessment processes and be moved between providers to be able to get different levels of support. Evidence also shows that unhealthy behaviours tend to co-occur and cluster, especially in more deprived areas like Oldham. So with multiple behaviour risks evolving over time. Therefore, most effective interventions take a holistic approach and address multiple unhealthy behaviours in one transaction. Therefore, we agreed to go out to tender, Council and CCG, for a service that would encourage and support people, both adults and children and families, to be able to make and maintain those healthy behaviours by offering effective evidence-based interventions for a number of health behaviours in a holistic way. This would remove the need for an individual or family to have to be referred multiple times or see a number of different workers to meet their support needs. We also wanted to make sure that the service had a specific focus on working with those most at risk of health behaviour related harms and the vulnerable groups in order to reduce those health inequalities. So we developed a specification and asked that a health improvement and weight management service included the following. And I'll give a brief summary of the interventions which are listed in your paper, but I'll allow ABL colleagues to provide that further detail. So obviously we asked for there to be a single point of assessment and signposting. The service would include that community stop smoking support, and that there'd be a weight management support offer that was all age and flexible, incorporating universal, targeted and specialist elements. We also asked that the offer included physical activity support for both children and adults, and that there was also support for post-NHS health checks. We know that around 5,000 health checks are undertaken in Oldham a year. We also asked that there was a targeted community health MOT available and that support following the outcomes of those health MOTs, and that the service could offer alcohol brief interventions and low-level mental wellbeing support. In order to enable that service, we've also included within the specification delivery of training programmes for the wider workforce to be able to embed those messaging about make every contact count and 5 ways of wellbeing, as well as a digital offer to increase access, reach, engagement and to sustain behaviour change and help people on their health journeys. I've included within the paper how the service will contribute to a range of high-level outcomes around reducing the smoker population and the number of adults and children who are overweight or obese or physically activity, as well as reducing the number of adults with high vascular risk scores and those consuming alcohol above the recommended level, as well as that contributes to reducing health inequalities. Specification for the service sets out clear expectations for all of the key outputs and deliverables expected from the service, and these details were in the paper of the people that the service is expected to work with. And commissioners and the provider have worked together to agree a performance management framework, and there'll be quarterly collaborative contract monitoring meetings between commissioners and provider throughout the contract length, and that performance management framework will be reviewed throughout the contract also. One of the questions in the paper is whether Health Scrutiny would welcome an update of the first 12 months of delivery of the service, including some of that relevant performance management information and the contributions that the service has made towards health outcomes. And so we ask that Health Scrutiny consider that after you've heard all of the presentation. I'm going to hand over to Angela now just to provide a brief overview of the procurement process, and then she'll hand over to ABL so they can talk more detail around Your Health Oldham and the service offer.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, my name's Angela Welsh and I'm Senior Commissioner for Children and Maternity for the CCG. So the CCG and local authority have worked in collaboration to jointly commission the new health improvement and weight management service through an open and robust competitive tendering process. The teams initially came together in 2019 to agree the approach and to develop the new integrated service specification. And as Andrea says, this was the first time that we came to do a joint commission. We held a market engagement session, which was well attended. We had 15 different providers attend who informed the spec development. And along with that, we had a public engagement exercise, which involved over 50 residents, including those with lived experience, and those also contributed to that spec development as well. And coincidentally, about 2/3 of that cohort agreed in principle to the merging of the two services, as Andrea alluded to. The tendering process commenced prior to COVID, but unfortunately had to be paused for a short while. However, within a few weeks, the teams were back up and running, and it went out again in July. We received 8 high quality bids, 7 of them progressed through to the interview stage. Evaluation panel was made up of commissioners, public health colleagues, and the clinical director for maternity and children's services. So we're really pleased to announce that ABL Health have been awarded the new contract, which went live on the 1st of January. ABL have successfully delivered services across Oldham, including Tier 3 weight management and more recently the Oldham School Brokerage Service. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce ABL Health.
Thank you very much, Angela. I'll just share my screen. I am here with our CEO, Denise, and my colleague, Nick. So Denise, I'll hand over to you once I share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So, hi, I'm Denise Leslie, CEO of ABL Health, and thank you, Chair, for giving us this opportunity to just share a little bit about the service with you. So, a little bit about who ABL are and what we believe in. We're a socially driven community healthcare provider based relatively locally in Bolton, but we've delivered across GM and certainly in Oldham communities for now over 10 years. So we're fairly well embedded within Oldham. We're a small company, but we've got a really big vision. And as it says on the slide, we started with and still have really big plans for how we can put clients at the heart of what we do, how we can look at their issues in a holistic way, find solutions that really relate to the context of their life, and how we can empower clients to take control of their own health. So how do we do it? Raz, can you just move the slide on? Okay, so we do it by having a really strong set of values and a vision that underpins everything we do. We do it by developing flexible and bespoke and culturally appropriate delivery approaches. And I think that was quite a strong part of our tender that came out certainly in our presentations to the commissioners that were scoring those tenders. We do it by ensuring that behaviour change methodologies underpin everything that we deliver. We do it by always being driven by the evidence base, but actually being bold enough to sometimes challenge that evidence base and certainly to improve or contribute to national evidence bases. But we do it by getting alongside our clients in the communities they live to co-produce solutions and together remove barriers to moving forward. But you know, sometimes we simply do it by being kind and thoughtful, working with the people in a way that we would want to be treated and we'd want our family to be treated. And ultimately, our purpose, our vision, our values is really about two key things if we drill down to it. It's about reducing health inequalities and it's about getting better outcomes. Raz, if you'll just move on. So who makes up our team? As you can see, we've got a real multidisciplinary team with a range of appropriate skills, GPs, dietitians, nutritionists, etc. Those are our delivery staff, and obviously we're supported by all the back office functions, BI, IT, etc. I think one of the interesting things for a contract like this, it will benefit from having a weekly, well, 3 times a month clinically led MDT, which is quite unusual for this level of service. And again, I think you can see from the slide, staff are really, really important to ABL. They're the only thing we have, really. We don't have a magic widget that we've manufactured. It's our staff, it's their dedication, their professionalism, and really care about the service users that's going to make a difference in this contract. Thank you. I'm going to pass you over to Nick, one of my director colleagues who's been quite fundamental and involved in the visioning of this service. Nick?
Yeah, rookie mistake. I was on mute. Yeah, thanks, Denise. Well, I'll start with a brief overview of the service. I won't go over stuff before, but as Andrea has mentioned, Your Health Oldham's made up of a number of lifestyle services that were previously commissioned as separate contracts. The aim being to deliver the contracts as part of an integrated approach. So with this service, we're looking to move away from the sort of traditional siloed approaches to lifestyle services and really support people with multiple lifestyle changes in a seamless way as possible. And I'm sure as members, you'll have come across people in the areas that you represent who are frustrated when they don't feel in control of the access of the services they're accessing. When services don't flex to meet their particular needs, that results in a feeling that things are being done to them as opposed to things being done with them. So, so rather than taking those pre-existing services and simply bringing them together and managing them under one contract, we went back to the drawing board with this service. So it's been redesigned from the ground up to be a service that's user-centered, to be integrated and have that seamless movement of people throughout, whether it be starting off in their pathway might start in smoking cessation, move to weight management, or whatever path they take. So Raz will go on to describe that in a bit more detail, but essentially, in a nutshell, the service is built around sort of 4 key fundamentals. So the first one is to understand the individual. So as Denise mentioned in her slides, you know, we're a people-powered organisation, and if you don't spend the time at the beginning to really understand somebody in their context, then you're not going to help them make a change. The next one is to plan around their needs. So, you know, we have an approach where we don't expect people to adapt to our services, more that we expect our services to adapt and wrap around the individual. The next one is using what's already there in the community. We don't want to replicate, we don't want to tread on the toes of some fantastic community-based projects and social initiatives that are out there at the moment, but we want to utilise community assets, and we want people to utilise the assets that are in their communities, whether that be community clubs, groups, parks, whatever they may be. And then the fourth fundamental in it really is working together with partners. So working as a system with partners for us is a key to reducing those inequalities and really improving the lives of the people of Oldham. You know, while we can make short-term improvements in isolation running this service on our own, the key to making the changes sustainable and really embedding the ethos of lifestyle change and healthy approaches into Oldham communities is to work together as that system partner. So the next slide that Raz is going to move on to really shows the breadth and variety of those partners and the ones that we need to work with to deliver its outcomes. So the people accessing the services are complex. Everybody's complex in their own way, and their lifestyle choices result from a combination of factors in their lives, whether it be their health, their education, their levels of debt, any domestic violence, mental health conditions, employment. You know, I don't need to, you know, we know what these things are. But if we don't first understand those specific determinants around that individual, then we can't help them make those sustainable changes. And further to that, if we don't have a network of delivery partners and community assets supporting us to users, people will quickly revert back to the negative lifestyle choices and patterns that they've had before. So we're not after these short-term changes, get them in, help them lose weight, and then kick them back out again. It's about really supporting them, linking them into the communities that they're working in. So the diagram's not exhaustive, there's not everybody on there, but each of those circles at the moment represents a statutory community organisation or a group that we have already developed relationships with and who we feel could support our service users to make the changes they need to improve their lives. So, I mean, that's the service in a nutshell, a bit of an overview. I'll hand over to Raz now to go into a bit more detail.
Brilliant, thank you there, Nick. So what I'll do is go into in a bit more in depth into the service model and how it will actually work practically on a day-to-day basis. So at this is a busy slide, but if we focus to start with on the centre where it says My Story Strength-Based Assessment, this is our true asset-based, strength-based assessment where it really helps us to understand the individual, their strengths, where they feel they need support, and how we can really develop a personalised service. Once they've come through our single point of access, our triage, and they're connected with our key worker. And through this My Story assessment, it's not just a tick box exercise where we want to find out their height, their weight, their measurements, etc. We really want to understand the individual to build that personalised service to meet their needs. And it goes beyond just understanding them. It's about understanding their environment, their social assets, the relationships they have with families, their friends, their sisters, the economic assets. And it's also about understanding the psychological assets. So we really need to understand their perceptions, their skills, their motivations to change their behaviour as well, and how motivated they are to change. It's also about, for us, understanding the interdependencies between lifestyle choices. So do they smoke? How much do they drink? Understanding their levels of well-being. What's also important, what Nick alluded to earlier, was how connected are they within their communities? What local assets and physical assets are they already using? Who are the community influencers that they are linked to as well? Because it's important that we embed ourselves and really from them understand the picture in the community as well as themselves as well. Ultimately, this My Story approach is about putting them at the centre and being really living our values and being people powered. It's about building trust and rapport with the individual over a period of time. And although the assessment is very conversational based, we will also complete the relevant assessments such as Audit C for alcohol, SDQs and SWEM-webs. But as part of this My Story approach, it's a journey and we will have multiple conversations along the way. So we can focus our attention on the rings that are outside of that. Now, this is our intensive programme and it's the core of our programme. This is what will really bring about kind of the behaviour change for us. It's about us working with partners to ensure that whoever comes into our service, they have a key worker that can support them. And whether they need support on it's around stop smoking or weight management, this key worker can support them and handhold them throughout the service, so they don't have to mention the same story over and over again. So the model's developed to ensure that seamless pathway through the universal, targeted and specialist support that has already been mentioned earlier. The words on the outside, if we can focus on that now, this is what can be offered to the individual that really helps us to make the changes easier and more sustainable. A lot of the work that will happen around here is less directly related to the outcomes, but very important. It will, together with intensive support, it will have a large impact on the ability for anyone in the service to make those changes, especially when we take into account us being embedded in local communities, working from local community centres and developing pathways and links to other local assets, such as the work we can do with Mind and Refer to one another, and also Healthy Young Minds and other local providers as well. a key part of this and ensuring sustainability is also about developing champions, linking in with other volunteers as well, and developing peer educators, and together as a system driving that prevention agenda from the bottom up. What's also important is also how we work with the wider system. So how do we link in with primary care and secondary care? Running joint clinics and where possible, you know, running clinics from local surgeries, running clinics from local community centres, so they're accessible, and that helps to reduce barriers to accessing the service that we have. It's also about the wider system, so being at the table, at the decision-making table, and being present and being part of the development of the action plans around food strategy, the obesity strategy as well. Working alongside the tobacco control and the smoke-free agenda and the smoke-free workplaces agenda. It's also about the voluntary sector and how we really help to build capacity through the community fund that we have, through developing community champions, through the training that we can deliver as well. So that means we have to be connected, being connected with Action Together, being connected with the voluntary sector leadership group that we have in Oldham. And also a really important thing is around how we work together around place-based integration in neighbourhoods. So we would like to work from the community hubs, because we know it's easier to have conversations and build relationships, develop solutions with partners if we're present at the table as well. But also alongside the service, it's also about how we can be ambassadors for Oldham if we are working across Greater Manchester as well, and help to bring resource back to Manchester, just as much as it's a responsibility, as we would say, for everyone on this call to also be ambassadors for us as well, for Your Health Oldham. So to summarise in terms of the service, what we have is a real personal, asset-based and targeted discussion with the individual. We then have a very personal, focused intervention, which is part of a more standard service intervention delivered by ourselves and with and through some partners as well. So we also have, as part of this, the work we'll do in communities to ensure we can support that behaviour change, sustain it and strengthen communities as well at the same time. And then what we have as well is that less tangible but really important system working that we can be involved in and influence as well. So you may be thinking, well, actually, how is this going to work in practice? So what we've included is an example journey, and I'm conscious about time. So when we initially presented something like this at the interview, we had 50 minutes to present this, and I'm conscious that we only have a couple of minutes. So I'll give you a brief snapshot on this as well. So example journey, there's a woman, 41, lives with a husband and three children, works long hours, dad smokes, and both parents drink at home. And we've received this referral through the NCMP pathway. So, busy slide. I've purposely put this on here because this demonstrates a family's journey through the service. And I hope that you can see that it's very messy, but that's intentional. It's there to show that many of the clients and patients that we'll work with have complex needs. And within families, they'll have individual needs as well. So this represents the patient's pathway. It's not straightforward. Their action plans, their journeys will start at different times, reflecting the complexities and the different motivations within that family as well. So we've taken all that on board, and through experience of delivering similar services across the country, we've developed a refined way of working. So this service caters for individuals as well as the whole family. And in terms of the action plan, 1 second, I'll guide you through how this will work in practice. So it's another busy slide, but I'll mention a few key points of how we'll work with a family with multiple complex issues. So we've received the referral pathway from the NCMP. Mum isn't happy because she's received a letter stating her child is overweight, and as it is through our experience, we find that we receive many calls with parents who are not happy that they received a letter stating their child is overweight. So our triage office, it comes through our single point of access. Our triage officer texts mum to arrange a time for a call that's convenient for her. It's arranged for a key worker to call her. The key worker calls her and arranges the time to actually visit mum. Mum is unable to meet during school time and wants to meet after work because of work commitments and childcare issues. So our key worker then visits mum in the home. And what we do here is carry out an initial My Story assessment because mum's agreed to access the support and wants more information. So the result of that initial conversation is that mum has agreed to come to Madlow for a first session to work with us at the facility, as they are one of our key partners around engaging families as well. So unfortunately, following that first assessment, Dad doesn't want to engage. He's not really interested. He's enjoying his drinking and he's enjoying his smoking at the time. So mum attends the first session and we continue the My Story approach. And here we're able to find out more about the family. So what sports they like doing, how they spend their free time, their hobbies, what food they like and what the diet's like as well, what their aspirations are, and actually who they've worked with in the past. And it haven't really received much support in the past, or they haven't known where to go. So as part of this care pathway, what's developed through this My Story assessment is that they've agreed to embark on this journey around health improvement, and the sessions are structured around their needs. And what mum would like to do is check in for 30 minutes at the beginning of each session, and then she'd like the family to do some healthy cooking program together, because it's very rare that the family actually do activities together. And as part of that, the children will then take part in some of the activities that are already on at Madlow. So for attending the sessions, they can take part in football. They can also take part in, I think, 18 other activities during that session. What we find out here is the key worker focuses on making snack pots with the family, as what they find out is they're snacking quite a lot. So they make healthy snack pots, but also support mum to cook healthy, nutritious meals. And all she's doing is really slightly adapting the way that she's cooking. The children then take their cooking home, and this is a way to nudge Dad and change his behaviour and help him to get engaged with the family. With the programme. And what we find out over time is that the children report that they've made new friends. They feel better about themselves, and they've now started playing football at home with Dad. So what we try to do all the way is nudge Dad to engage with the project. They're now cooking snack pots at home and using that to snack as well. And mum's also making healthier food. Dad can see a change, and because he can see the change, he's now invited to a cooking session by the children themselves. So with Dad getting involved now, Dad has his own assessment, and following that, Dad also sets a quit date and has started engaging in healthy sports in the local community from a referral that we've made. So what we'll see over a typical example kind of family journey in terms of outcomes is that Dad has quit smoking, mum has reduced her alcohol intake, mum has also lost weight through the journey through diet and nutrition and the support from the key worker. The children are much more confident in themselves. They've met new friends. They're taking part in activities outside of school. And through our relationship with local organisations, the key workers handheld them and taken them to join a local rugby club in Hathershaw. And due to the success of this and the opportunities that are provided through ABL, mum wants to give back. So mum's decided she wants to volunteer with the organisation and help some of her friends to understand how they can cook healthy meals as well. So this is a brief, simplified case study, shortened down for the purpose of this meeting, but I can hope it demonstrates how we can have such complex families and issues, but along the journey we can use several different theories and ways of engagement to engage the whole family and ensure they all have action plans. So final slide, I'll hand over to Denise. You're on mute, Denise.
Sorry about that. So yeah, thanks Raz. So if we sort of umbrella out now from that individual family, what does it mean to you as a Health Scrutiny Committee? What does it mean to the wider Oldham system? What do we actually hope to achieve through the service? So very importantly, at the centre of it is that family or that individual client that comes to us. And clearly that's the centre triangle on the slide. We want them to improve in various ways. We want them to reduce their risky behaviours, for instance. We want them to self-manage with a lot more increased resilience. We want them to live longer, but really importantly, to live more years in good health. We want them to connect with the community assets, etc., etc., etc. I'm clearly not going to read all of those things. But if we go to the left, what does it mean to their community? What might begin to happen through this osmosis effect of so many people accessing the service and improving their well-being? Well, we hope that we will get reduced smoking and reduced obesity rates. We'll reduce social isolation. We'll have more sustained community-led initiatives, again, etc., etc. There's lots and lots of improvements. If we switch to the right-hand triangle, what does that mean to the wider system? Well, all of those will build measurable benefits at a system-wide level. Things like reduced pressure on GP appointments. Now, how good will that be, particularly at the moment with what our brilliant primary care colleagues are doing and the pressures they're undergoing? Reduced prescription costs, which benefits the whole system, improved population health, economic benefits, which is relevant to one of your other speakers today. So at the end of the day, what we want is improvements for families, improvements for individual, changes for communities, and the wider system benefiting to basically get a healthier population that live longer in a good quality of health, a social movement for health. So thank you. That was a very whistle-stop tour. I'm very conscious we might have overstepped the time allocated, but thank you, Chair and members, for listening. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. Raz, could you share your screen so we can see anyone? Thank you for that. Do any members have any questions or observations? Councillor Alias?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Really excellent presentation, and I hope that we get plenty of success from this project, because it is coming across as it's going to be doing some really good, wonderful things. Just a couple of things. First of all, I just want to ask if a similar project has been done in another area before, and what kind of numbers have been achieved. And secondly, as you know, within Oldham, the main problem with health inequalities under these particular headings, smoking cessation, weight management, and physical activity and stuff, it exists mainly within the wards around town centre, and within these wards, the majority of population is from either Asian communities or Eastern European communities. And what other projects, similar projects, have found in the past, from my knowledge, is that they've all struggled to connect and engage with these communities. And I know within the presentation, you said you're working with a lot of community organizations and a lot of other partners, and I'm hoping that they will help you or they will signpost people onto your project. But at the same time, I'm also thinking some of these people, like community organizations and others, why would they want to do something like this? I mean, what's in it for them? So is there anything sort of particular that you've already started to do in terms of engaging with these communities from around the town centre wards? Thank you.
If I take it to start with, but Katrina might want to come in, there's definitely a lot of evidence across the country now of making what was previously siloed services, so a weight management, a smoking and alcohol etc. service more integrated. And there's lots of evidence coming out, nice guidelines, etc., of getting better results where we can treat the person or the family in that holistic manner, where we can look at all the sort of wider determinants of their situation and sort of pick off a proper order for treating them, because behaviour change is really, really hard, and you can't expect people to stop smoking, lose weight, sort the debt problems out, stop their alcohol overindulgence, etc., all in one go. You need to help them prioritise and help them make really baby steps, really small steps towards that sustainable behaviour change. So yes, there's lots of emerging evidence, certainly from this country and elsewhere, that treating in an integrated manner is the more appropriate way now. Katrina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thanks Denise, and yeah, completely agree with what you said there on the evidence base. I think the other thing to say is that in developing the specification for this service, we have looked at best practice from elsewhere and what's working else in other parts of the country. I think, you know, every area is doing things slightly differently, and often that's appropriate. And what we've tried to do is take the best of what we've seen from elsewhere and try to make it specific to Oldham and what we understand about the needs in Oldham. I think in terms of your question about what impacts are being seen elsewhere, so we can, at an individual level, it's, you know, you can see some of those outcomes in the, you know, people who go through the service have lost X percentage of weight. It's really difficult, as Denise said, behaviour change is really challenging, and to see those impacts at a population level, so to see a big difference in, for instance, overall levels of obesity at a borough level, it's likely to take several years for that to happen. That's sort of a generational project, if you like, and it's, you know, this service will absolutely be one part of that, but it's also about lots of other services and how we change the environment that we have in the borough to make that possible as well.
Thank you. And you also asked about sort of partnerships and working with grassroots community. For the purpose of the tender, but also before, because we've delivered in Oldham for a long time, we've sort of worked with lots of different partners at different scales, different levels, from the real grassroots groups up to sort of Turning Point, big charities, which are, you know, huge compared with us, etc. So what we did before this tender ever came out, because we were delivering in the area, we knew what was going to happen. We started to gather together lots of brains, lots of local knowledge, and started to respond to what we felt was needed at a local
community. We know recently around the supporting with COVID, but also in terms of engaging the BAME community, whether it's young people, whether it's
Chair, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we've lost our link at the moment, so we're not broadcasting. If you could just give us a few minutes, we'll try and get the link back up. But I don't want the conversation to continue because you'll then have to do it again. So okay. If I could ask you please to turn your microphones off because the sound can continue, and we'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Go ahead, Raz. See if you can rewind back to where you started.
I'm trying to remember. No, of course I remember. Yeah, I was mentioning that we have delivery partners that are embedded into our delivery model. So I mentioned Ghazali Trust and how we will have staff seconded to there who will work. They've got experience of working with communities. So we'll work with and through partners as well. We also have Wi-Fi Northwest, who have a great record of working with women, supporting them on healthy lifestyle journeys around cooking as well. We've been delivering a lot with the Chai Women's Project as well, so with Najma, and we've delivered some pilot sessions over the last year to groups of women. And these sessions have been absolutely fantastic because it's engaged women that wouldn't normally engage with health services. And we've spent the majority of our time myth busting, because there's a lot of myths that or wherever they've got this information from, hasn't been the correct information. So we've worked with Najma, who's part of the delivery partnership as well. We're also working with Madlo, who will support with reaching out to the families, children, young people as well. We also have a partnership board. So in terms of ensuring that we're working together, we're developing this model together, not just over the first 12 months, it's over the whole period of this, that we'll have a partnership board that will drive service improvement, service quality, developing the service as well. And in terms of supporting sustainability and capacity building in the community, which I've seen the comment that you mentioned as well, is that as part of our social values, we'll also support smaller organisations to develop, write funding bids. We have volunteering time, which is embedded into our contracts, and actually we use this, day in, day out to support smaller charities, help them raise funds, offer specialisms around bid writing, help to recruit volunteers, but also we'll have a small community fund where if there's a gap within the gap in terms of delivery within the area, we can support service users to set up some type of activity as well. So we'll support sustainability of community initiatives in that way. So in terms of working with partners, they're really embedded in our offer, but we know there's a lot of work to do in terms of that developing them wider pathways and wider partnerships as well.
Thanks for that, Raz. Nyla, before you go, you had your hand raised, or have you gone already? Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I can do briefly. I just wanted to ask, it might be slightly off the subject, but I just want to ask is, through my profession, we're seeing a rise in people being diagnosed with diabetes through this pandemic. So, I mean, not young people, probably just in the middle age, sort of like coming into 50-year-olds. So obviously they do have family members, but this is affecting their mental health and obviously their personal and well-being and their family members as well. But when they're getting discharged from hospitals, they're not getting the right support. So I just wanted to ask is, how do they reach out to yourselves, or do they have to be referred to yourselves, or would you reach out to them? Because in my profession I'm finding that we're having to advise them on how to get help from dietitians, or getting back to their GPs to ask for a referral to dietitians. And with one individual, for instance, it's taken them nearly 4 weeks to get an appointment with the dietitian to get the right help and support with their sort of use of insulin, for instance. And to me, that's not fair. So if you could just help me on answering that question, please.
Where we can help is the obesity that goes along with diabetes, because type 2 diabetes has a huge impact, has a huge relationship with obesity, and we can support on all the lifestyle changes that are needed to help them reduce their diabetic risk. We can't do insulin management, that's not part of our role. In terms of referring them into service, they can self-refer. We're looking, as we move through the next stage of COVID and the whole vaccination programme, which everybody's just too embodied within at the moment in terms of most healthcare professionals. But once that urgency of that's over, we'll start to be building pathways in both primary and secondary care. Unfortunately, we've had quite a lot of our primary care meetings having to be postponed a little bit because of the vaccination programme, but we'll be looking at pathway development in primary and secondary care, which hopefully will make it all smoother. Nick, you can probably say a bit more about the referral IT system. Because that will hopefully be quite smooth, won't it, as well?
Yeah, we've we obviously run a number of services across the country, so we're used to integrating into primary care systems and working with secondary care around their systems and processes as well. So we have secure routes for referrals to be made, and we can work with EMIS, because I think predominantly GPs are on EMIS across Oldham, so that to make that referral process a click of a button, as opposed to them either having to explain the service to somebody and ask them to ring themselves, or the GP having to send an email or something like that. So we have that the systems in place to allow those referrals to be almost click of a button to come into the service. So yeah, there's that seamlessness there.
Raz and I have done some very preliminary discussions with Councillor Chauhan, and it's very keen that we, once we've got our feet under the table with just getting this up and running and mobilised, that we start to have some more conversations with him about diabetes prevention, about diabetes reversal, and particularly that pre-diabetic group within type 2 diabetes. I'm not sure of your profession, but I think from before I've picked up, is it pharmacy?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Again, once the sort of main COVID push and vaccination push is over, we'll be making links with pharmacies, and it'll be great. We can probably come through yourself to start looking at how we can get a lot of information out best to different pharmacies in the area.
Yeah, it's just that health, obviously the weight management element does come into it, because obviously diabetes probably would have been undiagnosed with patients if they weren't diagnosed with COVID previously, but because they've been diagnosed with COVID, it's probably been highlighted because of that. So yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ibrahim. And I know you need to leave now, so thank you for your time. Councillor McLaren, I think you had your hand raised.
Chair, I just would like to try and understand a bit more about capacity, actually, because obviously in the past, when we've talked about troubled families, for example, we've been faced with situations with multi people, if you like, multi agencies engaging with a particular family. So I just wonder how you intend to develop this strategy, whether they will have a caseworker, for example, because you've talked about a multidisciplinary approach, which would suggest a range of other professionals engaging in the programme, and that's not been found to be particularly successful in the past. So are we proposing to do something rather different on this occasion? And that said, what kind of numbers are you able to handle, or is the organisation flexible enough to be able to take on board additional staff members if need be, other professionals if the need should arise, or are we working within a sort of agreed parameter within this contract in order to be able to, if you like, deliver the outcomes, deliver the KPIs over a given period of time?
I can take that if you want. So I think from a point of view of capacity in the service and the multidisciplinary approach, there's a couple of things there. I think where we're coming from with that approach is that within our organisation we have a wide range of disciplines. So we have experienced social workers right the way through to psychologists, dietitians, nutritionists, GPs, and what we offer to this service is the ability for if a key worker who might not be clearly as qualified as a GP or a psychologist or something like that has an issue with a particular case, they can take that to our MDT to discuss it. And what they'll get there, which is relatively unusual for the sort of like especially the traditionally tier 2 level things and weight management and physical activity, is that wide breadth of experience to be brought in. I think what you were referring to around the multiple people being involved in somebody's intervention. Now that is really tricky. You're absolutely right. And I think in the past, the approach has been that somebody comes into the service, they are then passed to another service for a while, then passed back and passed somewhere else. Our approach and the way we like to work is to hold that individual in our service in the middle and bring the other services into them throughout their journey, and that's through developing more than just referral pathways. So the partnership working we do and we have existing in Oldham and in other areas isn't just about, well, here's our service, this is what we do, can you refer to us, can we refer to you? It's about how do we bring our services closer together. So for instance, we work with drugs and alcohol services in some of our other areas, and we provide physical activity sessions as part of the step down out of drugs and alcohol services. The idea being that you can replace a negative activity like drinking, substance misuse, with a positive lifestyle intervention such as physical activity. So we try and embed our services within the others rather than passing from pillar to post. And it's about us having a joint case working approach as well, whereby, if we feel that somebody needs to go for debt management, rather than just hand them to the debt management service, we'll seek to have a conversation with the key worker in the debt management service and talk around the care plan for that individual, so that we're aware of what's going on in their service, they're aware of what's going on in our service. And that approach in other areas has proved it's difficult and it's a lot more resource intensive, but it gets the better outcomes long term. And then your other comment about flexing for activity, we've modelled this service, financially, and staffed it to hit certain targets and certain throughputs. However, the way we deliver services, everywhere we go, we're constantly reviewing and working with commissioners around adapting the service and flexing it to need. So if there's a joint agreement between commissioners and ourselves, and please commissioners tell me if I'm going off road anywhere here, and we decide, well, actually we thought we'd do X amount of activity to this particular group in weight management or whatever. However, we feel that the need is now somewhere over here, somewhere else. We flex and we move and we redistribute that resource and that allocation. However, there is a limit to that, because there's a limit to the resources we have.
So how many caseworkers do you have, and what's their average sort of caseload?
Raz, have you got that off the top of your head?
Well, they haven't got, actually I can come in slightly, but they haven't got an average caseload yet, because we've only been going for...
What have you done elsewhere that would suggest what you might be able to manage?
I don't know the answer to that. I know in a single service, like a smoking cessation service, our best smoking cessation specialists are getting up to 200 quits a year, and it averages from about 160 to 200. Weight depends on the specialism. So if we're tier 3, which most of our weight is, it's a much reduced caseload because of the complexity of those clients. I'm sorry, I don't have those exact figures.
Right.
We have built the model on that expectation. We have built the model on that expectation that this is what we're delivering elsewhere. This is what's working elsewhere. So if we're delivering 200 quits, that's what we expect the team here to deliver. But we have been running. I mean, we've gone live since the 4th of January. So we are slowly out that.
But Corey, there are some outcomes provided within the report in terms of the number of individuals that the contract has to engage and work with. Andrea, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, thank you. I was just going to draw attention to 3.9 in the paper, which does have those numbers and the expected outputs that we'd expect them to work with in terms of the different interventions. So some of them will be from year one, and we'd expect those per year. Some of them are aspirational, and they'll be worked towards incrementally over the period of the contract. So we've just agreed all of those KPIs in that performance management framework. But for example, for the stop service, we're expecting and the service.
Councillor McLaren, did you have anything further to ask?
Well, we haven't got to the bottom of it really. The figures are there, but obviously what I'm trying to find out is what kind of put them into a context, if you like, and what might have been achieved previously elsewhere, in Bolton, for example, etc., on which this contract might have been based on that experience. I would imagine it's played some part in it, I guess.
Absolutely. As part of the evaluation process, obviously, we ask the providers to submit their organisational structure and how they would work towards those outcomes and KPIs that we'd set out in the specification. Sure. So, as commissioners, we were assured that the model that's in place, that they'll be able to achieve those deliverables.
Well, the important thing is that it has to work, basically. So I was going to suggest to the chair, perhaps we could have a look in 12 months in that case and see how it might have progressed.
Yeah, definitely. The only other thing I wanted to add to that is obviously a lot of your presentation has concentrated on people who've, a lot of it's been around cure and how we can work with individuals to change their behaviour, etc. But what about the work on prevention? Some, like there might be individuals who are on the cusp of going either way, and how would you engage with, let's say, large employers like the council itself? How can we get our staff and our elected members to sort of around sort of smoking, for example, weight management? I'll put myself into that category. So I don't smoke, but in terms of weight management, I'm sort of issues there. But like, how would you work with large employers to ensure their staff are engaged with some of the stuff that you're trying to do? Or is that not part of the remit? If it isn't, then fair enough.
No, I can come in there. Denise, you're trying to say something? You're on mute if you are.
Denise, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I couldn't get it off. Sorry about that. It isn't specifically named in the spec that we have to work with certain employees, but we're very, very happy to tailor workplace health programs into any employer of different size. And we have experience in the past of working with SMEs, fairly large SMEs up to 250 employers, and we've worked right down to micro businesses with people with just one or two, and we've done the whole range of lifestyle interventions. So we're very, very happy to come and work with council employers, with any big employers in the area, and put a programme around them. At the end of the day, we're commissioned to get numbers through the service, and with an emphasis on priority groups. And so that's really important, because that's going to help with the health inequalities, but very, very happy to tailor programmes around any employer's needs.
Yeah, just something for me to follow up on that. We've already met with Fit for Oldham as well, and the organisation, one of the organisation development leads, to look at how we work together, how we can train, how we can help to roll out the MEC programme and integrate with the Fit for Oldham programme, which offers some physical activity and wellbeing activities for the workforce as well. So those conversations are underway, and hopefully you'll see something in the future that you can get involved in, Councillor Actor.
Right. I've got two more hands up. Katrina, Andrea's put hers down now.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, this service has got a really important role, but that prevention strategy goes much wider. So it's all the work that OCL do around promoting, and sports clubs do around promoting physical activity. It's about us having the great network of parks that we've got to encourage people to get out and get walking, the food strategy and how we make sure we've got good quality affordable food and that people know how to cook. So there's so many different elements to this, and it's such a big challenge, I think, as well. No one, we need all those bits of the jigsaw coming together.
Councillor Alias.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, really. As we're in sort of lockdown and you can't do anything face to face and group work. As we know, obviously you'll be doing a lot of online engagement. Have you kind of looked at, in terms of your outcomes and outputs, if you've kind of proportioned them in a way where currently with the online engagement you might not be able to get as many numbers as maybe 6 months down the line, if we're hopefully out of these lockdowns and we can work on one-to-one and group-based work basis. That's when you'd probably be able to engage more people and maybe be able to deliver more outputs. But as it stands now with the lockdowns, we've sort of discussed this before. I don't think you were in the meeting at that time with the digital inclusion within the deprived communities. Obviously, a lot of people are struggling to have or find IT devices, and they haven't got access to internet and things like that. So have you looked at how you will be engaging with these deprived communities in the first instance whilst the lockdowns are on?
Yeah, if I can come in about results. So we've delivered continually from March the 23rd. We rapidly changed a lot of our face-to-face delivery to digital, to phone support, etc. We found within our smoking services, we have had absolutely no decline in outcomes at all. In fact, in many of our areas have improved. Now, if you think about the fact that COVID is a respiratory disease, there has been that bit of a nudge for a lot of smokers to try to improve the lung health in case they get COVID, etc. So that may be understandable. We struggled a little bit more with weight management. We've got people engaged, but some of the measurements are a bit more difficult. A lot of our clients don't have scales, etc. But we are continuing to deliver. In terms of the whole digital deserts and that agenda, yes, we're completely aware of it. It's difficult for some clients more than others. What we are doing is an awful lot of phone support where people don't have different levels of technology to engage, lots of one-to-one support. We have got a range of digital technologies that people are accessing. So for instance, we're finding with a lot of our Bangladeshi women, WhatsApp groups are their preferred method of communicating and getting support from our staff. So we are trying wherever we can. Clearly, once we get back to face-to-face, we're back to where we hope we'll get much higher numbers. But again, rest assured, in other services we run elsewhere, we are keeping our service delivery going. It might not be 100% as we would want it, but we are still engaging with people. We're finding where with some of our more grassroots partners like Najma, for instance, she's very fundamental in getting those groups together and finding the preferred method of communication, which is helping.
I think on that as well, we in one of our other areas where we deliver somewhat of a similar service, we've analysed the indices of deprivation and where our clients are coming from. This is a service that launched in April last year, so it launched just when the first lockdown came in, and I myself was surprised actually, because I thought we were going to get we weren't going to hit those deprived areas as much because of that digital issue, but actually we are still predominantly delivering to deprived communities and people from areas of deprivation. So in other areas we've kept that up. The other thing is that we are we're prepared and ready to go live as soon as these restrictions come down, and we'll do that obviously in a safe manner. And for us, again, in the other service we're delivering, the absolute priority to go out and start engaging was to go to those groups where we felt those digital deserts were, etc., and get those services up as soon as the barriers come down. Because you can say, well, people don't have smartphones and laptops, so let's go to telephone, etc. But some of these people won't access anything other than face-to-face, and it is a concern of mine throughout this time, and we've just got to focus on getting to those groups as quickly as possible as soon as restrictions are ours.
Yep.
I think it's also a request to all the groups that we go to talk to, but including your group, help us on that journey, because the more that we can get involved in a deep level in the different communities that you're all working in and passionate about, the more resource can go to actual delivery rather than to just that initial engagement. And I know from discussions with Andrea, that's something that she supports. So the wider we can get involved in the system and the deeper we can get involved, the easier it is to actually do what we want to be doing and getting those behaviour change methodologies embedded, rather than just using up resource to do the initial engagement. So please spread the word, let people know we're here.
We'll do that. I haven't got any further indications of from members or anybody else in terms of responses. So the recommendation in the report is for us to note the outcome of the procurement exercise for this service and the new service offer. And then we've had one recommendation from Councillor McLaren in terms of looking at the outcomes in 12 months' time, in terms of how the offer has gone. Are members happy with that further recommendation? Is that seconded? You're on silent. Mute, sorry, Councillor McLaren.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you for that.
Agreed.
So, right, thanks. Right, finally, thank you for your time and for giving up the time this evening and having the patience and the stamina to stay with us for the last couple of hours. So it's up to you, sir. We only got another couple of items to go through, but thank you for your time again, and I'm happy for you to go and enjoy whatever's rest of the evenings that's left. Not much though, but thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Just let people leave and then see who's still here with us. Not many left now. So item 9 itself, which is the Health and Scrutiny Committee work programme for 2020 and 21. So Mark, are you still with us?
I am still with you, Chair.
Yeah. Do you want to present the report to us?
I think the report and the work programme stand as presented. Just 2 quick updates. Your recommendations that you forwarded to the Cabinet arising from the ban on fast food advertising for issues to be progressed at the Greater Manchester level were considered and agreed at the Cabinet last night.
Okay, that's brilliant.
And the recommendations you made at the last meeting around costing up toilet signage and the provision of a changing places toilet arising from the Not Every Disability is Visible council motion, that was referred to portfolio holder and officer to cost up. The portfolio holder supportive of the costing arrangements. So there'll be a fuller report on both those issues coming to the March meeting.
Okay, that's brilliant. Could you, as part of that costing up, could you just take into account the comments made by Councillor Hamlet about the signage?
Yes,
as an email.
Yeah, I replied to Councillor Hamlet earlier, so
right,
he was happy. He was happy with my response, Chair.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah. So, members, do members note the report? I'm sorry, the work programme.
Yeah. Great, Chair.
Thank you. Item 10 is in terms of our next meeting, which is on the Tuesday of 16th of March at 6 p.m. So I'll see you all then, if not before.
Not before. Noted, Chair.
Thank you. See you then.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of the evening and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.